So warm greetings from Redwood City, and as we continue this series on mindfulness of breathing, the mindfulness practice has both a deliberate side of the practice and that which is non-deliberate, or to say it maybe in a clearer way, that which is active that we do, and that which is passive that we allow for. And the balance between those two shifts and changes as the practice goes along. So certainly if a person has never heard of meditation before, and they maybe read a book about it and say, I'm going to meditate, they have to actively put themselves maybe into a meditation posture and kind of get themselves started and change the momentum of their mind, even from what they have been doing, to have the momentum of the mind being a little bit different. Now the momentum of the mind is to be present without a lot of thinking about things or reacting to things, but to have some ability to stay present, and maybe to stay present in a very simple way, in the present moment, with something like the breathing, just being with the breathing, staying on the breathing. And so there's a deliberateness to that. There's an active quality to that needs to be there. As the practice deepens, or as we're able to stay more and more in the present moment, there's less of the deliberateness is needed. It's almost as if the deliberateness has set in place the motion to let go of all the distracted forces, all the different things we might be doing. And so now we're kind of at rest, staying here, present. And we don't have to do any more deliberateness in it. And so to borrow from an ancient metaphor, if someone who herds sheep, a shepherd, is, the sheep have gathered all over the mountainside, and the shepherd deliberately travels around the mountain searching, looking, trying to find the sheep to gather them together. So there's a deliberateness and active looking for those sheep. Once all the sheep have been gathered and they brought back to down by the river where the core pasture area is, perhaps, and they're all gathered there and they're happily eating in the pasture, then the shepherd can lean back against a nice tree, the trunk of a tree, in the shade on a warm day, maybe looking out across the pasture. And then there's not much deliberateness in the looking anymore. There's not much intent to look and find the sheep. Now the shepherd can just sit back and gaze in a kind of more receptive, open, passive perhaps, way of just kind of gazing upon. And rather than looking for the sheep, the shepherd is content just to see the sheep, to allow the seeing to happen without needing to search or look or be intentional. So the same way with mindfulness practice, as initially there's an active quality, a deliberateness, the training, come back, focus, be there. And with time, everything gets gathered together, all the disparate parts of ourselves that have been lost up in the mountains and wandering around, have been gathered together, come back to the pasture where they can kind of eat what's nourishing and supportive. The Buddha called mindfulness, when it's really gathered in and centered on the body, the feelings, the mind, and the mental processes, to be a pasture for the meditator. And everything's gathered together here. And now what we can do is we're not so active, but we just observe. There's seeing, but no looking. In the sense that looking being the active engagement of the eyes. And seeing is just what happens when we allow the eyes to operate. Like the difference between listening, which is active, and hearing, which doesn't have to be active. It's just we hear something without trying to hear it. So the emphasis today is to kind of begin appreciating the way in which mindfulness can be a passive, receptive quality that doesn't require so much work. It's not so deliberate, because the deliberateness has brought us to the point where we can let go of that deliberateness. And so at this point, the Buddha actually uses the language of observing. Just observe. And so this is the direction we go today in the meditation. So taking a comfortable, upright posture. Upright meaning engaged and intentional. A deliberate posture, even if it's laying down. And then taking some long, slow, deliberate breaths. A deliberate way of, deliberate ritual almost, of turning towards this experience here and now. And deliberately, as you exhale, to relax the body, settle in. Deep breath in and then settling into this body. Letting your breathing return to normal. And then as you exhale, deliberately bring your attention to different parts of your body and deliberately, actively relax those parts. And sometimes a sense of deliberateness is a way of being definitive or clear that this is what I'm going to do now, is be here in the present moment. So bring the attention to the face and relaxing on the exhale all the muscles of the face. Softening around the eyes. And if the eyes are trying to look, intentionally searching for something, maybe let the eyes rest. Soften the eyes in their sockets. And as you exhale, to soften the chest. Bring the attention to the shoulders. Soften the shoulders. Bring the attention to the belly. And as you exhale, softening the belly. And then bring the attention to the global body, whatever way is easy for you to have a global awareness of the body. And as you exhale, relaxing the body. And there can be a deliberateness around the mind as well, to bring your attention to the mind, where you feel the mental activity and thinking the most. And as you exhale, to soften the mind, to quiet the mental activities, calming the thinking mind. And part of the reason we get pulled into distractions is because there's some emotional force, motions that are kind of pushing us in a direction or evoking the thoughts. And whatever anxiety there might be, see if you can relax it and soften. In a way that's reassuring to yourself. That it's okay to be here, relaxed. If there's excitement or desires or aversions or resentments, annoyances that are driving your thinking, on the exhale, perhaps you can gently, lovingly settle those, quiet those. And then to settle into your breathing, to deliberately, maybe even lovingly, turn your attention over to the experience of the body breathing. Making room in your body for the body to breathe just the way it does. Lots of breathing room to breathe as you're breathing, as the breathing is breathing itself. Whatever way you're breathing is okay. Make room for it, feel it, hang in there with it. And then imagine that you're at ease, resting against the trunk of a tree, looking out upon a pasture, perhaps an expanse, and simply see the breathing in a receptive, allowing, non-deliberate way, but more a receptive way, from the kind of observation that doesn't interfere with what's being seen. Seeing just allows the breathing to be as it is, simply as something to be seen, to be observed, as a naturalist would observe animals and nature without disturbing them, just observing them, without judging them, just observing. Settle down, settle back, and observe the inhales and the exhales, allowing everything else around you to settle down and relax, because all you need to do is to observe your breathing. When your mind wanders off, intentionally, deliberately bring it back. And then when you're back, see if you can relax the deliberateness to observe, to just sit back and watch. Observe the breathing. Observe your experience in the present moment. As an uninvolved, non-interfering observer, just observing. When we actively or intentionally, deliberately looking, we might not notice the things we're not looking for. But when we're seeing, settling back, opening up, relaxing, we might see a wider range of things. The observation, the observing might be broad and more inclusive. As we come to the end of this sitting, I'd like to say the same thing is true for love. As wonderful as intentional, deliberate love and acts of love can be, there is loving which is not so deliberate, intentional. It's more of an open field, like observing, just observing the scenery, There's something about love when it's not directed, not so deliberate, that can grow wide and broad and encompass so much more than what we're directing our love towards. And so with our goodwill, to bring these two together, love and observation, to settle back and just observe the layout, the scenery, in a broad, open, non-interfering way, can make room for our love to be the same. Broad, expansive, encompassing without interfering, without directing, without needing, sitting with our back against the trunk of the tree, looking out across the pasture, with a love, a goodwill, a kindness for it all. The full expanse of love. So in the last moments of this sitting, perhaps you can feel your way to a way of kindness, goodwill, love, which needs nothing from others, which is secure in itself, that can just be broad and encompassing it all. Broad and non-interfering kindness, goodwill, expressed in the words, "May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings be peaceful. May all beings be free." And resting in this kind of goodwill, may we deliberately express this goodwill in some of the details of our contact with other people. May we live this day for the benefit of others and for ourselves. So, we continue with this series of talks on the 16 steps of mindfulness of breathing. And we're now coming into the last tetrad, the tetrad on observation, on observing. The last tetrad is the last steps 13, 14, 15, and 16. And they have in common, all four steps, the introduction of a new verb, and that's the verb to observe. And it goes something like this: one trains to observe X. Or one trains observing X. One breathes in. One trains observing X. One breathes out. And so in these last 4 steps, there's something we're observing, and and we continue with the breathing. And there's something about the continuity of mindfulness of breathing, which is allowing us to observe things, but helping us not latch on to them, helping us not to cling or hold on. There's a kind of way in which by staying with the breathing, there's a continual kind of letting go. That breathing is where the mind is resting. And we notice all kinds of things happen, but in a certain way we're kind of letting go of our involvement, letting go of any prioritization or doing anything with it or changing it or thinking about it. We're just kind of going along with the breathing, going back to the breath, being with the breath. And it's a way of keeping ourselves soft, fluid, relaxed, letting go, and allowing this psychophysical system to have a break from our active involvement, our active, deliberate kind of engagement and doing and wanting, and letting something deeper to happen that could only happen if we get out of the way. And so in these last 4 steps, this is represented very strongly by this verb to observe, the idea of observing. And it's the first time in the Anapanasati Sutta, this discourse, 16 steps, where observing comes into play. And if you read through the teachings of the Buddha in the suttas, we see that most commonly observing as a practice is a very well-developed practice when the mind is able to be really centered in the present, concentrated. A strongly concentrated present mind is the one that begins doing the practice of observing. And so there's a lot of preparation in the 16 steps. The first 12 are preparing ourselves for this capacity to lean back and just kind of watch and just observe what's happening without being involved. Some translators translate this verb, anupassati, as contemplating. Contemplating in the way that I relate to that word is closer to thinking, reflecting about something, thinking about something. It suggests a kind of more active thinking process. Observing, which is actually etymologically what the word anupassati means. Anu, the prefix, means towards something, and the passati means to see, seeing. And so put them together, we're gazing onto something, seeing, looking towards something, in a sense. And but because of this, I think observing works very well as a translation. We're observing. And observing, there is a kind of deliberateness, kind of in observing, but it's not quite the same as actively looking. It's just settling back and just being an observer. And I liken it to being a naturalist who goes into some kind of natural setting to observe some natural behavior of animals or birds or something. And it's very important that the naturalist not interfere with the life there, and somehow stay kind of unrecognized by what's happening, so they watch nature unfold without the interference from the humans, and then just to observe. And so earlier in these 16 steps, it begins with breathing in, one knows one is breathing in. Breathing out, one knows we're breathing out. So this idea of knowing is one of the attentional faculties we have to know. As we begin knowing the breath, and we never stop knowing the breath. We recognize the breath, we're there with the breathing. But then we're also, what's happening, we're experiencing things. We're experiencing the body. We're experiencing joy and happiness. We're experiencing the mind. We're experiencing gladness. We're experiencing settledness, steady concentration. And we're experiencing liberation. And this experiencing is also a little bit passive. It isn't that or receptive. It isn't so much like we're doing something. We're just allowing ourselves to experience. Knowing also, we're just knowing something, and we're not judging it or criticizing it. We're just knowing it clearly. And these two activities of knowing and experiencing are here to ground us here in the present moment. And so at some point then it shifts to just observing. And so this is where the art of deeper mindfulness is to observe. And in the other mindfulness discourse of the Buddha, the Satipatthana Sutta, there's a lot of language of observing. And there also, if you read the text carefully, it's there the observing is the higher stages of mindfulness. That's where observation comes in. And so what's earlier, the knowing, the experiencing, is kind of grounding us in the present moment, helping us stay present, learning to develop concentration, to be resting in the present. And when the ability to be focused and present in the moment becomes easy and light, and we feel really grounded and centered here, that is when observation becomes stronger. And because we're going towards being less and less intentional, deliberate, even less and less activated or active in the mind. Because the more activated we are in the mind, the more kind of waves or agitation or clouds there are over our capacity to see clearly. And so as we get quieter and quieter and quieter, what we're left with is this ability just to observe. And then we learn to trust that, to settle back. Okay, now I'm just observing. I'm not needing to interfere or, again, no judging. I don't have to fix anything or adjust anything or make anything different. I'm just watch. And you can feel that in this kind of very centered place, that if we start reaching out to do something, to fix something, to judge something, to think about something, it feels a little bit like we're losing something. We're losing the open field. We're losing the freedom. We're losing the peacefulness of just observing. And so it's very clear that observing is a better place to be in this deeper states of meditation. And it becomes very important in these final steps because we really want to get out of the way and not overlay concepts, ideas, judgments, shoulds, shouldn'ts on top of our experience. We want to really be able to take it in, things much closer to actually how they're perceived, actually how before, the experience before a lot of judgments and concepts and generalizations that we make about things. Just to observe. And so there's a turning with this last tetrad from the practices that are more meant to be concentrating, settling, focusing, to now we're switching to vipassana. Observing is where vipassana, or insight practice, begins. And classically, insight practice is built or is done on the foundation of a mind which has gotten very stable, concentrated, still, joyful, happy, soft, at ease, content, safe, and liberated from the hindrances. And now the mind is ready for insight practice. And the insight practice is built on this capacity to just observe the experience. And in fact, vipassana, the word that we translate as insight, has the same verbal root as anupassana, vipassana, and passana in vipassana again means to see, and the V is usually understood to be a prefix here, meaning to see clearly, or to see it's kind of like a prefix of emphasis, to really see or clearly see, or to observe, to clearly be aware. So anupassana, anupassati, to observe, and that's the medium through which we're going to explore these next 4 sets of practices of mindfulness of breathing. Then someone asks, why is vipassana often taught as an intro to mindfulness? It also works that way, and it doesn't have to be done only with the strong base of concentration, and so it can be done, practiced directly. But a lot of what people are doing when it's practiced directly and immediately is sorting their way through all the ways in which they are not concentrated. And so they're beginning to become wise about the hindrances, about distractions. And so rather than kind of more directly getting concentrated, there's a concentration through a lot of understanding and wisdom about all the things that keep us going distractedly. So then we can settle. And with wisdom, rather than settling with, sometimes they say settling with faith, when a person just is dedicated just being simple and focused. But sooner or later, if you start with mindfulness, the concentration is brought in, and mindfulness and concentration become partners. If we start more with the concentration, then later mindfulness is brought in, so they become the partners. So both are true, and both are valuable. And this anapanasati can be seen as kind of a hybrid of these two, with a lot of emphasis on this settling, relaxing, concentrating, that sets a stage for strong mindfulness. So, thank you all very much.